few days ago, my family and I were blessed with a baby boy. His name is Paul Anthony. So the next 15 minutes will be what I would have shared with Paul Anthony had he been sitting here, one of you. I would like to start with the title of this talk. I have 3 comments. Number 1 is the theme is about leadership. Number 2 is the word learned. Actually, it should be learning, because although I understand these concepts and principles intellectually, I'm actually in the learning process, and I think it will take an entire lifetime to live what I'm about to share with you. The third point is that this is only part of the obvious lessons that I had to, unfortunately, learn the hard way. There are many, many more lessons that I had to learn the same way, but in the interest of time, we'll only share part of them. I will start with the first lesson, and I will build on what Sarah asked you as an exercise in this morning, when she asked you to introduce yourself to each other. And if you would be kind enough just to recall the way you introduced yourself. And I'm betting that what you said was your career or your social status, if you're single or married, or if you're a manager, or an architect, or a designer, or a doctor, or a professor, whatever. This is all normal, because I used to do the same, and I still do the same. But what I would like to share with you is that this is a dangerous proposition. Why? Because all these are roles that you're playing. Being a manager is a role. Being a professor is a role. Being a designer is a role. Being a husband is a role. Being a wife, a son, a brother, wherever it is, it's a role. And the trick is that all roles are temporary, they're volatile, and they're about to end at some stage in your life. So one day, you will not be a manager anymore. One day, you might not even be a father if your children get married and decide to go on their own way. One day you will wake up and you see that your business has disappeared. So what does that mean? If you're not a manager anymore, does that mean you're a nobody? If you're not a CEO anymore, does that mean you're a nobody? I learned this the hard way. I work for a company, an international company, if I may say the name. I work for a company called Reuters International, the famous international news agency, for little less than 20 years. And my last job there, I was the head of the Middle East operation, the managing director. And I used to introduce myself as Michael from Reuters. What a dangerous proposition. Because a time came, and I wasn't anymore the managing director of Reuters Middle East. So what does that make me? Because of the position that I held, which is a public position, I used to dine and wine with head of states. Every time I visited one of my countries, the next day or the third day, I used to meet the head of that state. Now, if I go to the same state and I'm not in that position anymore, do you think I'll have a chance to meet that person? No. So what does that say? Does that say I'm a nobody? On the contrary. So the point is that all these roles are just roles that we're playing. And in fact, the word role is a Shakespearean word developed 400 or 500 years ago for the particular industry of the theater. And as you know, Shakespeare, Allah yarhamu, said, all life is a play, and the world is a stage, and we're just playing roles. So whatever happens with you in life, remember it is happening to your role. It's not happening to you. So if your marriage failed, does not make you a failure. Your role as a husband failed. If you were fired for some reason from your business, it does not make you a failure. Your role in that particular environment failed. If your business went bust because of economic conditions, it does not make you a failure. Why? Because your role as an entrepreneur failed. And it's a very important leadership lesson to shield yourself with this notion. Why? Because when you exercise leadership, most of the attempts that you do, most of the initiatives that you will do to exercise the leadership will fail. Now, if from the first attempt you quit and you say, I don't care, just because you took it personal, then where would that put you? And where would that put the environment that you're trying to lead? So remember, you're not your role, whatever your role is, and all roles end. In fact, you're far bigger than any role. I learned this the hard way. The second principle I would like to share with you is the issue of conflict. Now, being part of the Middle East, we are all used to conflict. But at the same time, also, we're fed up of conflict. So we have this natural tendency to avoid conflict at any cost. طلعت روحنا من conflict. And what I've discovered is that although many kinds of conflicts are bad, and definitely there is a big space for conflict resolution, but at the same time, our natural default reaction to conflict should not be negative. Because what I've learned is that whenever there is conflict, a question arises. What's cooking? Conflict is data. So what I've learned was, instead of trying to be a fire extinguisher, to put conflict off at any time I saw conflict around me, is to give myself some time, to ask myself, this is a symptom of what? Why is it we have this fight at home? Why is it I have this conflict with myself? Why is it I have this conflict with my friends, in my relationships, with my clients, with my associates? What is this telling me? It's a symptom of what? And the danger is that if we rush and distinguish this conflict, we might have killed an opportunity to do something. Because conflict, ladies and gentlemen, is part of life. In fact, life is about conflict. When my wife was pregnant, what was happening here is conflict. When you boil an egg, you can never boil an egg without heat. You need heat to boil conflict, to boil an egg. The entire principle of change, of metamorphosis, is nothing but conflict. So what I've learned was, instead of having a negative attitude towards conflict, instead of running away from conflict, instead of avoiding conflict, I've learned to use conflict. And one of the terms of leadership is to be an orchestrator of conflict. Is to orchestrate conflict, is to ask yourself, how can I make good use of what's happening? Because if there's no conflict, there's no life. But that requires courage. It requires, what does it require? Bravery. Thank you. So it requires courage. It requires courage so that you stay in the game, although your heart is pumping, right? It requires wisdom, because you need to know what level of conflict is a functional conflict, is a positive conflict. At what stage the conflict is turning into danger. And I've made lots of these mistakes. At some stages, I allowed conflict to go far beyond its functional level. And it didn't work. It fired back. It turned into a negative outcome. At some stages, I was scared. I acted by my human default reaction, and I put conflict off quickly. I missed an opportunity. So the wisdom here is to understand what level of conflict, of heat, is functional, is important, is necessary for this thing that is happening to cook in the right direction, because you need that. In fact, let me take it even further. In leadership, sometimes you have to start conflict. Sometimes you have to provoke, because if the subject is not on the table, then how can you deal with it? It's not easy, and you might intellectually understand that, but trust me, it will take courage to go beyond your heartbeats and your shaky knees and your default, and to embrace conflict and use it for something productive. The third lesson, and this is the most important lesson, I could talk about this for hours, but we don't have time. I also learned this the hard way. Understanding leadership is also called learning how to dance with the elephant. I see many young faces here, and I'm telling you from now, I am sure you had your issues with authority, just being at home with the father and mother or whoever represented them. But in your path of your career, you will deal with different bosses, with different authorities, right? And it's extremely important that you understand the entire psychology of authority. Just open TV at night and see what's happening around you. All these people killed, all the dynamics now that are going on in the Middle East, they are nothing but a manifestation of this dilemma, the issue of dealing with authority, because it's expensive. It's expensive not understanding how to deal with authority. It will cost you careers, it will cost you opportunities. The corporate industry is littered, absolutely full with people, brilliant people, whose career was frozen, or who were kicked out, or were sacked by boards and by staff and by their managers, or by their people, or by their bosses, because they did not understand the psychology of authority. And this is extremely important for our survival, because we live in systems. We don't live in void. We live in families, we live in buildings, in communities, in neighborhoods, in departments, in countries. And every system is built on a structure of authority. There's no system without authority. At home you have father or mother. In the street you have a policeman. Maybe not in Lebanon, but you have a policeman. At work you have a boss. So you cannot avoid that. And while we're all part of systems, authority is big. It has access to resources. It can make your life hell if you don't understand it. At the same time, it can open wonderful opportunities for you if you understand how to deal with it. Right? And we are all trained to deal with authority, because we were all born helpless, and we had to rely on a mom or dad to get us through life. So in fact, it's the first thing we learned. The absolute first thing we learned is how to deal with authority, because you had to sort of manipulate your mom to feed you whenever you were hungry. Right? And that developed. Now, because no relationship is perfect, because no mom and dad are perfect, what happened? We all have scars, and I had my scars with authority. We all have scars. Now, the key to survival, and that's what I would teach my son, because of course he will carry his scars his relationship with me, is to understand these scars, to understand what have become your pattern of behavior, your default setting when it comes to authority, and to know how to deal with them. Right? I would like to share with you this slide. From 0 to 10, 5 is the default that you have when you respect yourself and you respect authority. The more you go towards 0, the more authority becomes big, the more you become small. So 5 is I respect authority and I respect myself. 4 is you go like this. 3, you go like this. 1, you go like this. 0, you are nobody. I'm a tissue. Khartouche fardak. Ghabrat radak. All these things. I have a full list of these things. The Middle East is famous of it. Anyway, so the more you go beyond 5, the more rebellious you become. So 6, you start ignoring. 7, the same. 8, 10, you become an anarchist. You kill authority, whether it's good or bad. You're just anti-authority. And what I invite you to do, and that's what I've learned, is to understand where you fit there. And to understand that the key to survival is to have the flexibility to move to 0 when you have to. Like when you're driving somewhere in the forest and somebody stops you and puts a gun to your head and says, "Give me your money." So what do you say? No. So you give him your money. Or 10. When you need to go to 10, you go to 10. But you better be damn strategic, because going face to face like this with authority is suicidal. In fact, it's not like this. This is authority and this is you, the pinking. So which one do you think will win? And the greatest lesson I learned from this was one of the highest moments of my life. I was fortunate and blessed with a meeting with Nelson Mandela. And he told a story about an encounter he had when the first time he went to jail. He said, when they took him to jail, so he and his colleague were stood like this. They were asked to stand in line, and the warden came and he started looking at each one of them, you know, shouting and screaming and cursing them, trying to break their spirit. You know, nose to nose, the things you see in the movies. So he said, when he came to me and he did that, I said to him, okay, you can do all that, but I'm a lawyer, and one day I will leave this prison, and when I do that, I will make sure I spend the rest of my life making your life hell, so you choose. Now the trick is, he said, I was praying that he would not look at my knees, because they were shaking. But it worked. So why am I saying that? There are times that you need to confront authority, to go to 10, but you better be strategic. So the key to survival that I have learned, and I'm closing, is to be flexible and to learn this amazing word that I'm still trying to learn it, which is learning how to negotiate with authority. To negotiate with authority, right? And to be strategic about it. Because if you don't know how to do that, if you want to exercise leadership, your life will be hell and you will lose unnecessary opportunities. And if you do it well, your life will be much easier and you will go forward in your family, in your career, and in any environment when you're trying to exercise leadership. And that would be what I would share with my son, Paul Anthony, if he's here. Thank you very much.